حي على الفلاح.
So when people are ready to get married, they will ask questions like, do you pray? Now, presuming that you come from a practicing Muslim family, the obvious answer is yes, even though you may not pray 5 times a day. Now, why are you going to say this? Because that's what the other person wants to hear. So then you come into something called question engineering, which is you learn to ask questions in a way where the other person doesn't know how to answer the question, or they don't know what the correct answer actually is. So you ask someone, are you more just or are you more merciful? Now you have to give an honest answer, because one is neither more virtuous than the other, right? So even when discussing these topics, you have to make sure you don't fall into that pitfall of giving someone the ability to answer the question in a way that they know that's what you want to hear. Number 2, in terms of these actual 10 topics, they're actually vast, and I think that's why we call them 10 conversations as opposed to 10 topics, because they shouldn't be conflated with one another. So number 1 is the past. In the past, we talk about everything that is relevant to the marriage, and this can be a wide variety of things, and I like to give examples as well. So a husband and wife, they're trying to cross a border into a different country, and the husband gets denied entry. Why was he denied entry? Because he had a criminal record that the wife didn't know about. So something like that is a very important conversation to have. You spend thousands of dollars going on a honeymoon and you can't even get there because you're denied entry into that country. So things that are relevant. Now people often ask, should I convey or confess my sins? No, that's not the point here. Your sins are between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is not relevant to this individual. Anything that would be relevant, you should. So if you were, you've lost your license, you're banned from driving, or you can't be entered into a country, things of that nature, you want to talk about.
Being a bit more honest, basically.
Exactly. Number 2 is the future. What are your goals and ambitions for the future? So there was a time where there was a huge discussion on hijrah. Certain people, they want to move overseas and live in a Muslim country. Other people didn't. Now you can imagine, if you haven't discussed this topic, you get married and the husband's like, okay, within 3 years we're going to be moving, to Saudi Arabia. And the wife's like, what are you talking about? I'm finishing my degree now. I want to stay here in England. So you discuss the future. What does the future in its generality look like for you?
With the future, because this is a big one, and it's I believe it's so general, because everyone has, again, I guess it comes back to what you're saying about how to engineer your questions, right? Because it's not enough to just ask what's your plan in the future kind of thing, because then you could say so many things, right? How would you kind of more specify, or how would you engineer that question? Because again, it's one of those really weird ones, the general ones.
So again, remember, this is not a question per se, it's a conversation, because it will cover a wide variety of things in terms of where you want to live, do you want to study, do you want to work, things of that nature. But what I would say is, ask questions in such a way where the person doesn't know what answer to give. So in terms of the future, you can ask, what are your plans for the future, and let them open up. You can also ask, what excites you about the future? So change that up a little bit, more intriguing. But then at certain points, you have to ask them, particularly for the sister, are you planning on working, or do you want to stay home? So over here, it's just about, again, being honest as much as you can. So that's the past and the future. Then number 3, we bring in the Deen. What is your understanding of the Deen? Where are you now? Where would you like to be? And this is something I can't emphasize enough. You have to marry people for their potential. You can't marry people for where they are right now. And this has to be taken in both ways. Because you meet someone and their iman is really, really high at this point, but eventually as time goes on and that high of iman goes away, then you're left with the real individual that's left. And at the same time, you could meet someone that they're really struggling right now. They've hit a rough patch in their life, things aren't going their way, iman is really down. So then when you get married to people, you're getting married for their potential and not for where they are right now. Because one of the objectives of marriage is that you both work on your iman together and you lift it up. Likewise, the role of Quran, the role of Islamic education, the role of reading together. One of the things I can't highlight enough, something simple as like reading Imam Nawawi's 40 Hadith or Riyadh al-Salihin, or even tafsir together, that will go a long way in the family. Is that something you're actually open to, right? So these sort of things, discussing them, in terms of what the values of our deen are, how important they are to us, how are we going to implement them, and having a discussion and dialogue about that.
A lot of people might say, okay, if I did ask, are you praying right now, and they say, you know what, I'm actually not, then a lot of people might just rule it out straight away, because for them, obviously, prayer is really important. But what you're saying is, important, which is also seeing potential.
Of course.
Because they could, within a space of time, become far better than even you are.
Of course,
right?
100%. The very fact that you feel comfortable enough telling me that I'm not praying right now shows me that you value honesty.
Right.
And that shows me potential.
Okay.
Because the liar, that's the person you want to stay away from, even if they pray 5 times a day. Whereas the person that's honest, that shows me potential. So I would say there's always a way to look at things.
Okay.
So yes, salah is very important. No one can downplay it. It's a fundamental pillar of our faith, and it's the distinction between Islam and kufr, as the Prophet ﷺ says. But at the same time, understanding the reality behind it, that not everyone is at the same place where we are. And when the Prophet ﷺ was introduced to his companions, he saw in them potential. And that's what we need to see in people as well, particularly our future spouses.
Okay.
Number 4 is family.
Okay.
Family consists of a wide variety of topics. We will talk about living situation over here. Are you expecting me to live with my in-laws? We will be talking about what's going to happen on Eid. Eid day comes. Are we going to visit your family? Are we going to visit my family? What are expectations in terms of my interaction with your family? Am I responsible for cooking for them, cleaning for them, doing their laundry? Like, how far does it go?
Right.
So those sort of things I think is very important to understand. Particularly this relationship with in-laws is such a fragile relationship.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. Like, if you look at a lot of the breakdowns in a relationship, often it has to do with influence from the in-laws.
Definitely.
So discussing family at that time as number 4 is what I would prioritize.
Okay.
Number 5 is finances. Finances in terms of, do you have a job right now? Are you planning on getting a job? Where would you like to see your career in a couple of years from now? What are you doing to get to that phase, right?
Okay.
So those sort of fundamental questions. Same thing with the wife over here. Are you expecting her to work? Are you expecting her to stay home?
Yeah.
Have clarity on that, right? And also keep in mind that people do change their minds.
Yeah.
Someone may say that, you know what, I wasn't planning on working, but, circumstances changed. Something happened, a passion ignited. And on the other hand, a brother may think that, you know what, I want my wife to stay home, and she agrees to it, but then time comes, they don't have money to pay the bills. She may be forced to work at that time, right? So there has to be some flexibility at that time. So that's in terms of work. In terms of our savings, what are we saving towards? Are we going to be taking a mortgage for buying our house? What is our investment strategy going to look like? So that's number 5, which is finances. Number 6 is the kids. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Because now what's happening is, as more and more people are getting married, there's also this concept of, I don't want to have kids. I want to be free. I want to focus on my career. I want to focus on traveling. I want to focus on X, Y, and Z. So you have to make sure that the person that you're marrying is on the same page as you. If we are going to have kids, what is that going to look like? So having those discussions and seeing, what people are comfortable with. In terms of education, are we going to put them in Islamic school? Are we going to homeschool them? Are we going to put them in public school?
Right.
Are we going to put them on a Saturday and Sunday school? Like, have these sort of discussions. Number 7, we talk about friends and pet peeves.
Right.
So who are your friends? Why are they your friends? What makes them so special? And this is like based upon that concept of like birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
So if there's these traits in your friends, more than likely you'll have these traits as well.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we bring up the issue of what are things that annoy us. So things that you find very bothersome. And you'll be amazed that there's certain things that bother people that we would think very trivial. Like instances where, my spouse is always biting their nails and this constantly annoys me. So you have to discuss, those things that annoy you. Number 8 is expectations. Okay. So what are your expectations of me? What are my expectations of you? And how realistic are those expectations? Number 9, how do you spend your free time? When you have free time, what are you going to be doing? Again, what we do with our free time really, it's who we are. So you have this free time, what are you doing with it? Are you spending on social media? Are you watching movies? Are you playing video games? What are you going to be doing? And then the last one was health. Certain people will contract diseases. So if you have a disease, this is something that needs to be made clear in advance. Or likewise, if there's a history in your family, then that also has to be brought up, because that's going to be a serious discussion to have. What is your current state of health? Like, subhanAllah, there was one extreme case where a person had cancer and they hid it from their spouse.
No way.
A whole bunch of stuff is going on. They're like, I didn't sign up for this. Other cases where someone had health issues that was hidden, and then, on the night of the marriage, it came out. So these sort of things, subhanAllah, I think it's very important to discuss and be open and upfront about.
Yeah.
So the fundamental question we were asking with these conversations is, are we compatible?
Okay.
So now if you differ in something, understanding that differing is healthy and is actually good, but you can't differ on fundamental values. So for someone, religion is very important. For that person, they hate religion altogether. Those are fundamental values that you cannot reconcile. But in something like this, where a person likes to stay home and the other one likes to hike, how much do you hate going out and how much do you hate staying in? So you ask this question. If you absolutely detest it and can't stand it, okay, look, it's a fundamental difference.
Right.
But if it's like, you know what, I'd be willing to compromise. Where one weekend we stay in, one weekend we go out. No, everyone's happy in that sort of situation. So this is about being open and frank. But what I would like to highlight over here, marriage is 50% about knowing who you are. Like, who are you as an individual? Do you know all these questions that you're going to ask about to someone else about yourself first? And I think a lot of the times we don't, because we just look at physical attraction. Yes, they would be a good mate. Let's get married. But we don't know who we are deep down inside. And then as we try to find ourselves in marriage, that person has too much pressure on them at that time. Which we want to try to avoid.
And something else which I think is really important that I wanted to discuss today, and if anything it ties in with marriage and it ties in with your career, your life in general, and it's being spoken about so much today, is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Which is, and it's obviously something big that we find in the seerah as well of our Prophet ﷺ. It's something that you've spoken about before. Let's firstly define what does that mean? Everyone's heard of intelligence, everyone's heard of emotion, but when you put the two together, what does that actually mean? Yeah.
Okay. So it consists of three things.
Right.
The ability to understand your own emotions, the ability to understand someone else's emotions, and based upon the knowledge of these two key things, how do you get to a desired destination in the relationship?
Okay.
So that's what emotional intelligence is all about. And we have to understand is that there's certain things that people are blessed with, and there's nothing that you can do to build those characteristics, right? So your physical features, you're born with them. You can't change them. There's nothing that you can do to adapt to them. Whereas your muscles, you train them enough, they'll eventually get stronger and they'll build up. This is the blessing of akhlaq, that yes, certain people akhlaq comes very easy to them, but others it may be difficult, but you can still build on it at the end of the day. And emotional intelligence is something that you can definitely build upon, right? Something that you can definitely build upon. So just this simple hadith of none of us will truly believe till we love for our brothers what we love for ourselves. Being able to empathize with people that, hey, if this brother is in my situation, this sister is in my situation, what would they need? What would they want? What can I do proactively to give them that, or to prevent any harm from reaching them, understanding the situation. So I think just use that as a starting point. Give yourself enough time to understand what someone else is going through by imagining yourself in that situation. How would you want to be treated? How would you want to be spoken to? How would you want people to look out for you? And do that proactively for people. So just focus on this one simple aspect and you'll go a very, very long way.
Coming back though, because we've discussed so many different things, emotional intelligence, and then we discussed qualities and conversation points with your spouse, and then youth at the beginning, bringing all of this back to what we started with the heart, right? So like we said, that if this one thing is all right, then everything else is okay. Let's maybe end with a few kind of practical tips for those who are listening in this day and age with everything that's going on around us. What kind of things can we do to start working on our heart, start working on our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our connection with our creator, and our own spirituality? What would your last few practical tips would be?
So number one is limiting the exposure that your heart gets to that which is harmful to it. So the things that we listen to, the things that we see in particular, our heart is like, think of it as like a fragile baby. This fragile baby that needs to be protected from the cold. It needs to be protected from the harmful environment around it. That is what the heart is, something so fragile. So anything that comes into the heart and settles upon it is going to have a long-lasting effect. It's not just like an in and out situation. This is like it'll go in, it'll stay for a long time, and then it'll eventually find its way out. So I think limiting and the exposure of the haram and the harmful stuff to our hearts has to be number one. You cannot purify or soften your heart if the haram is still coming through.
Sure.
Number two is the role of istighfar. And this istighfar is an all-comprehensive istighfar, where understand that you are a human being, you will commit sins, but when you do commit a sin, you repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by giving up that sin, by feeling bad about that sin, and then by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. And this comes from the theological standpoint that no matter how many sins I commit, as long as I don't die upon shirk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive me. Yeah. And that is what needs to be remembered at all times. And then number 3 is just asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a soft heart that is firm upon the truth. And if I was to throw in the number 4, which would compete with number 3, is control who you hang around with. Right? This is part of the exposure, but it's a point that needs to be made, that the impact of your heart is directly related to who you hang out with and what they speak about and what you get exposed to.